Hello, good afternoon. My name is Robin Mulkers. Do you hear me? Well, good? Okay. So just to introduce myself a bit, so I'm currently an architect. I started as a developer when I was 16. I coded in many languages, Basic, Fortran, C, Java. I did 15 years of Java, and nowadays I'm working with Python and Go. So as a role, I also played different roles. I started as a developer, I did project manager. My current manager won't believe I did that. And then I did architect, system architect, application architect, enterprise architect. I did also technical sales, and now I'm more and more in the management at Buildwise, where I am the responsible for the IT data and applications team, and also, as the team is small, I'm also doing some enterprise architecture. Buildwise. This company, what is this company? It's a Belgian company. Buildwise is an innovation center for the construction industry in Belgium. So we aim to bring the latest technologies and the latest processes for the construction industry, which is facing a lot of challenges nowadays. Think about energy, carbon footprint reduction, sustainable construction, and these are really challenges that the industry is facing. And Buildwise is really doing projects in order to bring solutions and accelerate the introduction of these technologies and these tools in the industry in Belgium. Now the talk of today is about master data management. So if you look at Wikipedia, master data management is the management of master data. Okay, it doesn't really help. What is master data then? But master data is opposed to transactional data. So everything that is not a transaction, like an invoice, like an operation, like a payment, all this is master data. Some examples: a product catalog is master data, a database with customer information, that is master data. These are things that are not related to transactions, but are necessary to make transactions. We also don't have to confuse master data with reference data. Reference data, think about a list of country codes, this type of data. This is really a reference, but not really something meaningful for the business or required to make transactions. So master data management at Buildwise. So Buildwise, amongst the service that we offer a kind of help desk service. So if an entrepreneur, a construction company has an issue on the field, they can call the help desk and have an expert giving some form of advice to solve the issue. So in order to do this, we have implemented a CRM almost 10 years ago. And at the time, Odoo was not an alternative. It was just not considered as something powerful enough, and it was not meeting the requirements. So the CRM project at that time went into Dynamics, Microsoft Dynamics. And over the years, it has evolved to other processes. So we instead, on top of managing cases, we also manage now subscriptions and contributions. So the architecture of Dynamics is more, you have to view Dynamics as a kind of, it's an ERP, but you have, Dynamics are the screens, and the database is Dataverse. So when we talk about Dataverse, in fact, we refer to the data that is manipulated by Dynamics. And then in 2022, we did a project to implement and modernize some other processes at Buildwise, and these processes were mostly financial processes, accounting, a bit of HR, for example, the time off requests are in Odoo. And we are expanding this, the usage of Odoo within the company. For example, we have now a project to manage the projects within Odoo. Obviously, these two systems, they have to exchange some information. And when we have a new customer or we change the data of a customer, could be an address, could be an email. In that case, this information is useful for Odoo, because if we want to invoice that customer, we need to have the latest address or the latest email. But we also have a data flow in the other direction. If an invoice is paid, Odoo will receive that payment acknowledgement, and then this information is also useful for the CRM, because if the customer is calling the help desk and has not paid any invoice for the last 6 months, maybe the help desk will say, okay, we would like to help you, but please pay your subscription to our service. So the communication between these systems goes in both directions. So now let's take a step back and think about what are the possible integration points in Odoo. Odoo could play two roles in a master data management process. It could be the master itself, or it could be a system consuming master data managed by another system. And I will cover both use cases. This first use case is, okay, what if Odoo is consuming master data from another system? Then you have several layers in Odoo. You have the user interface, and there you have mostly JavaScript code. You have the backend, so the backend of Odoo, this is mostly in Python, and you have the database, and the database is a PostgreSQL database. And you could have communication at all these levels. For example, in the user interface, you could have a button. If you click on that button, you open a window or you open a tab to the other system, and then you have a view of what the customer data or what the product data is in that system. That is a very low-cost form of integration. You don't really have any exchange of information, you just have a link and you view what the situation is in the other system. But then you could have integrations at the backend level. At that point, you have two possible communications. The first is the external system is going to push some information. So, for example, you change the email address of a customer, then that information is propagated into Odoo. And to do this, you have several mechanisms. You can use XML-RPC, which will be replaced by JSON2. And you have also another mechanism called the webhook automation. This is something you configure in Studio. You get a kind of secret URL that you can use to send information. But you can also work the other way around. You can say, okay, in Odoo, I'm building a custom module. And in this module, when I need to have a particular customer data information or a particular master data information, I call an API, I call a microservice, and I go and retrieve this information from the external system. Then at the database level as well, you have possible integrations. You could do SQL, insert, update, delete, so the external system could update the database used by Odoo. This is also a possibility. Now, let's have a look what happens when Odoo is the master. So Odoo is keeping the master data. It could be, for example, customer data in REST partner, for example. And this data needs to be propagated or is consumed by another system. In this case, you also have the possibility to use a very basic integration using a simple URL from the external system pointing to Odoo. You have also the possibility to push data from Odoo to the external system, and you have several possibilities. You can have what we call webhook notification, and that is something you can configure with Studio. So you can trigger an action when something happens, and this action could be, okay, I send a notification. You could also have implement some custom code and use an API or an SDK to actually push information to the external system. You have also the ability to pull, so the external system could call a service in Odoo to get the information when it needs it. So, and here you have the same protocols, XML, JSON RPC, which will be replaced by JSON 2. On the database, same stuff. Here you have something new. It's called change the data capture. So with PostgreSQL and with all database in general, you have the ability to fetch only the changes that happen on a particular entity. So you say, okay, I'm interested in a REST partner, and as soon as a record is updated in the database, I get an event, I get a message that I can query and pull, and this event contains what was the data before the change and what was the data after the change. This is called change data capture. And there are open source projects which allow you to automate this, and for example, Debezium, to name it, is really a system that will pull the change from the database. And then you have also the replication. So in Odoo version 19, you have an improved, or you have a standard replication system, and we will cover this later. And you have also the possibility to pull, so the external system could do a query in the Odoo database. This is also an option. Now, what are webhook automation? So you have webhook on one side that to get an event when something changes in the external system. That was when Odoo is not the master, and when Odoo is the master, you can create an action and send a notification. The issue with webhooks is that it's not something that is very secure, and it's kind of very basic functionality. So you don't, the API for the webhook automation is some secret API, but there is no security around it. So now, if we have the big picture, what are the preferred integration points? What don't we want to do? Probably we don't want to do an integration at the user interface level, because this is really too basic. It just lacks maybe the capabilities that we need to really retrieve information from the master data system. We probably also don't want to do a straight SQL insert update delete into the Progress SQL database, because if we do this, we would bypass the ORM. And in the Odoo ORM, you have you may configure additional constraints that are not in the database. So if you do a SQL insert in the database, you could break these constraints. So probably it's not a good idea to do this. Then we have to decide, do we push or do we pull? If I push, it means that when the master data change, I send an event to any system that would be interested by this event. If I do a pull, I just query the master data system when I need the information. So here you have really, the decision is not black and white. It's not that one is better than the other. There are advantages and constraints. Depending also on the volumetry of the replication or the synchronization, you have a different approach. So for example, if you just access a small fraction of the records in the master data system, why would you replicate the complete set of records in your system? So the economics of this are variable and depend on several factors. I try to summarize this. So in the push option, you replicate the data. It means that you need additional storage in the systems that are consuming this master data. If you have only, let's say, 100,000 records, it might not be an issue. But if you have 100 million records, then it becomes a problem. it costs money. Then you need also an extra queuing system if you push, because when you send your event, this event must be distributed to potentially several systems. On the pull side, you don't need anything of this. You just consume the data directly, you use the API, you use the microservice. It looks like it is really easy. But you introduce a potential performance issue. Because in your transaction, or maybe to render your screen, you are now not only depending on the database in Odoo anymore, you are depending on an external resource, which may take some time to respond. In terms of availability, you need also to have a master data system that is highly available if your customers are pulling information in a synchronous way. And then what if the external system is not available? But if you use a push, then it's very easy. The events, they are put in a queue, they are stacked, and then when the external system becomes available again, they are simply pushed at that time. But with the pull approach, if the master data system is not working, it's an incident. It doesn't work anymore. So in terms of resilience, in terms of availability, the push is better, but it comes with an extra cost, and this extra cost is I need to replicate the data, I need to have the processes to replicate that data, and I need to pay for the storage. So, if we recap, now we have this slide where we have push and pull, but basically we don't want to do this. And then probably we don't want to do a SQL select directly in the database, because if we do this, we generate a load on the database which could cause problem inside Odoo. And we also have this same availability issue. If we stop the Odoo system, we stop the database, then the SQL doesn't work anymore. But then we have also an issue. If we push, if Odoo is the master data and it pushes an information to another system, like in our example, we push a notification to Dynamics when we have an invoice that is paid. What if the external system is not there, is not responding? We call an API and we get an error. So here we need to pay attention to what we are doing. We need to find a solution in order to make the system work, even if the external system that potentially you don't control is broken or is on maintenance mode. It could also be that the external system is Odoo itself. So what if we have several instances of Odoo? Like we have a central Odoo and we have an Odoo in a store or in a different country, and these are separate instances. In that case, Odoo is the master and also the consumer of the master data. And Odoo, when we upgrade Odoo and we have to swap from a version to another, we know that we stop it for a certain time. And during that time, Odoo cannot fulfill pull requests coming from other systems. So it's not only Odoo that is going to go into maintenance mode, it's all the systems that are consuming the master data in Odoo which will be in maintenance mode or integrated mode. So, at Buildwise, what have we done? So we have, on one hand, we have Dataverse, which is the database that contains master data for customers, subscriptions, contacts, etc. In Dataverse, we have a system called change tracking. And the change tracking is basically we get a message when something changes in the database. We capture this message and we store this message in an event up. Event up is the Microsoft implementation of Kafka. And so it's very low-priced middleware to exchange events between systems. And then from this event up, we have a service. It's actually a Docker container, which is triggered when you have a new event. And this Docker container is connecting to Odoo using XML RPC. So remind that XML RPC will be stopped in the future and will be replaced by JSON2, but doesn't matter, it's going to be the same mechanism. So it means that in Odoo we have implemented a method, and this method allows us to get customer data, so we have companies or we have contacts, and get this information, maybe apply a certain filter, say okay, we are not interested by this information because it's not a billable customer, for example, and we store that information inside REST partner. So this logic had to be implemented in Odoo. And then Odoo is also sending information to Dataverse. And so by doing so, we see that the best is to use push mechanism, but if Dataverse is not responding, then we get an error, and we have to find a way to handle these errors. So what we did actually, we used an OCA component called a QJob, and when we get an event that we have to send to Dataverse, we create a job. And what this job does, this job is just using the REST API provided by Dataverse and send the data. And so by doing so, if Dataverse is not responding or is off, the system will still work. We will just have the events stored as queue in the OCA queue job, and as soon as Dataverse is back up and running, then in that case we just have to replay that information. And it was something that was originally implemented for each type of entity, each type of model. We made something special, and what we did, we made this component a generic component. And here you go, here you find it. This component was developed by one of our partners. I think they are in the room. Yeah, they are. And so, and this is a kind of webhook on steroid. So when you change something in a model, so a model record is updated or is deleted or created. In that case, you can trigger automatically the push of that information to an external system using a REST API. And by doing so, integrating Odoo with another system for master data, for whatever type of integration, is no longer, doesn't require a module anymore. You just configure the endpoint in the system, and you just specify what should be the format and the content of the message that I should send to the external system. And this is really something convenient. We are really looking forward to use this more and more for exchanging information from Odoo. Why? Here we have during this conference we had a lot of information about Odoo 19, and there are some new features that are interesting for master data management. But the first thing that is interesting is that XML RPC is going to be replaced by JSON2, and it will be much easier to invoke a method within Odoo from an external system. So this is really a very good feature, and we really look forward to replace and drop XML RPC with JSON2. And then another feature is the database read-only replica. So we can have a replica of the database, and it means that then it is much more likely that we could use integration at the SQL level. So we could have an external system that is reading a replica of the database. In this case, we could manage the workload generated by this system would not impact the operations of Odoo. But this is a synchronous replication, so there are also problems with this new feature that we would like it to be asynchronous. Okay, I'm done. So now it's time for questions. Just use the logo. No time? Ah, no time for question?
On n'a pas le temps de questions, mais il n'y a pas de questions.
Ah, there is no question. Okay. Thank you very much.